Welcome to the Sync Up with Infor, a dynamic discussion between leaders in the life sciences industry. Over the next 6 episodes, we're unlocking the secrets to a connected and integrated biotech and pharma industry. From the power of interoperability to the strategic choices behind integration engines, this series covers everything you need to know about building a robust data ecosystem. With insights from industry experts, case studies, and practical tips, each episode offers a new step on the path to data-driven transformation. Let's start building the future together. Hello and welcome everyone to our podcast series where we're diving into the exciting world of interoperability, integration, and connectivity in the biotech, pharma, and CRO industries. I'm your host, Jeff Mueller, and over the course of this series, we'll be exploring how seamless data flow and system integration are transforming the way clinical trials and research are conducted. But do not worry, we're not going to bog you down with too much jargon. Instead, we're keeping things engaging, informative, unfiltered, and hopefully somewhat fun. Whether you're a tech expert or just curious about how it all fits together, we're here to make sense of it all. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's unravel the complexities of data connectivity and clinical research without losing the human touch. I want to welcome our participants, Temitope Keys and Alexis Morse. Temitope, give us a quick elevator pitch of what you do and what's the most unexpected part of your job.
Well, what I do is find solutions to very complex problems. I am a clinical technology sales executive, so my responsibility is really focused around identifying both client requirements, client needs, and then finding a fit with the products that I might be presenting to them that are going to hopefully add value and support their clinical trials. The main challenge that I have faced over the course of my 25-year career has been that coming from the sponsor side of the world at AstraZeneca and Sanofi Synth-Labo, I understand that it's a very slow-moving machine despite the urgency the vendors might feel, and trying to reconcile that with the very real business demands that come from being a project-based business organization and trying to get an alignment there. I think of my job as almost translational in the science sense, in that there is oftentimes a set of obviously regulatory requirements, but study-specific requirements, program-specific requirements, sponsor-specific requirements, and then trying to match all of that up in some kind of Jenga that's stable throughout the 3 to 5 year run of a trial and maintain the business. So that's what, makes my career interesting and my days exciting.
It is exciting. Very interesting. Alexis, how about you?
Well, that's a great question. I'm really not sure what I'm doing. I'm still trying to figure that out.
I know that too well. Yeah.
No, my name's
Alexis actually works for me, everyone. So you'll see this kind of the banter go through the series here. So
maybe I should ask you what I do. No, I'm Alexis Morse. I'm a senior account manager at Infor. And I focus really heavily with our pharma, biotech, contract research, medical device, really that life sciences organization, those customers. And we focus incredibly heavily on that interoperability, that connectivity, a lot of what we're going to be talking about through this entire series, and how we can enhance that for our customers, what we can do to make that better. And it's a big learning process within this industry. If you think about what Tope said and all of the different participants and moving parts that come with that, it's exponential. So that's why I joke in saying, I don't know what I do because there is a lot of moving parts and change and constant change that comes with it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I know you think about the last 18 to 24 months journey that we've had kind of getting into these market segments, and it has been a constant learning, and we try to be very consultative, but the biggest thing we can bring the market is to keep learning, right? And express what we've learned. So I want to know how you two ladies met. So, and tell us a fun, unexpected story from your first interaction.
Oh gosh.
I stalked you, I think, right, Tope, in Boston? Yeah.
Yep. I have to say that going back to just some of the challenges of the industry and the nature of the work, it is relationships that make it easier. And Alexis and I met totally purely because she was a partner of ours at the company that I was with previously. I was a new BD person, any smart person will go meet the new salespeople to see what opportunities there are. And so we clicked immediately, as I hope people can tell. and it was just, I think, a very natural understanding of both our professional objectives, but also a real passion and an interest for what we do. I think, each of us has been part of organizations that play a particular role within the continuum of activities from life sciences into healthcare. And we, Alexis and I, were trying to bridge two very different organizations to do something different and hopefully drive more growth for our mutual organizations. And I'm probably a bit more senior in the industry than Alexis, but I think what I liked about you, Alexis, was that you were very, very interested. This is the type of work you can get blinded by a lot of things, but it's extremely interesting work and you can find a lot of passion in that. So I'm always happy to work with people like Alexis.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Tope. And I think that's honestly what was kind of my wheels were turning as you were speaking, is I think one of the most amazing things that have come out of being in this industry are the people that I get to meet and the relationships that you get to build and the knowledge. We'll be talking about some of the other participants that are going to be joining throughout the entire series, and just everyone I've spoken with, not only are they just a wealth of knowledge, but they're so welcoming and inviting. And I think one of my favorite parts about having grown our relationship, Tope, is, I can give you a call and say, hey, what do you think about this? What are your thoughts on this? And it's just really wonderful to be able to have your perspective on things. So I appreciate that. And I'm so happy that I stalked you.
Well, that is the connectivity, is it not, as the topics we'll be covering today. As far as the relationships go, that's really the huge overarching, connection point that drives all of the other more systemic types of things that we're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, Tope. And Tope, we really appreciate all the support and guidance you've given us over the last 12 plus months. You've helped us on a webinar and in the podcast series. So we look forward to future ways that we can interact with you. So let's have a little bit of fun. If you would describe describe yourself or a role in a movie title, what would it be and why?
Well, I'll say that I am a closet Christmas rom-com-aholic. So I don't know if I should answer this. Like in July, watching Christmas rom-coms. Don't tell my husband.
The small town girl comes back. Her high school boyfriend happens to be back home to take care of his parents. Lo and behold, we're drinking cocoa in the mountains.
Look at that. You know all of them. You've seen them all too, haven't you?
No, but my mother-in-law was a very big Hallmark Christmas in July person. So I got exposed to it. Between that and QVC Christmas in July. Yeah, my whole, yeah. But I would have to say probably on the other end of the spectrum, which is probably indicative of my personality, and I'm really into the show now, The Lioness. So
that is your personality.
It is, yeah.
It is.
I mean, number one, I'm a salesperson. You eat what you kill. So not to be too dramatic about it, but, that's very much the truth. I think that there's a team aspect to the show that I really like because you're essentially herding very highly skilled cats that you're trying to get to not do anything but the thing you need them to do. And I think in this industry, having direct reports who may not be as well versed in what is honestly, it takes a lifetime in this business to understand all the acronym soup, right? All of the regs, things like that, and trying to be compliant because she's still a government employee and not totally go outside the boundaries while still finding solutions to very, very complex problems and hopefully protecting your team and allowing them to thrive. So that's mine.
That's a good one. That's a really good one.
I think the term badass kind of sums that whole thing up, right? And I think that's where you're coming from. So
it really is. It is.
I think really if I had to choose one, give it a go. It's Zoe Saldana. Yeah, give it a go. Zoe Saldana. She's not bad.
Yeah. Season 2's coming out here soon, right?
I just started season 2. It's even better. It's even better. And wait a minute, we talk about voices on here. Morgan Freeman's in it, so the voice of God is in it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and now now that we plugged that, because I really think this whole podcast thing is going to take off, we're looking for sponsors. So
I know, Paramount,
yeah.
looking at you, Viacom. Want to talk science?
I know you're not asking, but my movie title would probably be Pitch Perfect, and then any Disney movie. No, totally kidding, but I love karaoke.
I love karaoke.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to Yakitori Boy when you come to Philly.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay, so let's get serious, but not extremely serious. Okay, so let's take a moment, give our listeners an idea of what to expect throughout the Sync Up. In this series, we'll explore some of the most pressing challenges and opportunities in biotech, pharma, and clinical research, with a focus on building a truly connected and efficient data ecosystem. Today, I want to set the stage by introducing our key pillars, though. So interoperability, integration, and connectivity. Tope actually alluded to connectivity. So we're gonna talk about through the series kind of the differences between those three pillars. These are the foundational elements driving innovation in our industry, helping reduce time to market, improve data workflows, and create safer, more reliable outcomes. We'll also dive into the real world case studies that highlight how organizations are streamlining data sharing and enhancing collaboration. Plus, we'll tackle questions around buy versus build strategies for integration engines, giving leaders the tools to make smart, informed decisions. Throughout the series, you'll hear about the role of real-world evidence in improving clinical outcomes, along with the practical strategies and insights to help organizations become more data-driven and connected. The series is broken into 6 episodes, each focused on a critical topic. We'll start by defining interoperability and its transformative impact, followed by episodes on integration, connectivity, and strategic decision-making around technology. We'll finally wrap up with future trends and actionable takeaways. So whether you're a leader in biotech, pharma, or clinical research, or just curious about the future of data-driven healthcare, this series is definitely for you. So stick around. There's a lot to learn and even more to discuss. So with that foundation set, let's get into some questions, right? So Tope, we'll start with you. In your experience, why is interoperability a crucial component in the biotech and pharma space, especially in today's rapidly evolving landscape?
Thanks, Jeff. So I want to take a step back and I think help our audience understand the distinctions between interoperability, integration, and connectivity. And I say that because one of the big challenges is bridging the divide between life sciences and healthcare, given everything from the difference in nomenclature to regulations to use cases, and thus the applicability of certain strategies at certain times within the R&D life cycle. So when we think about interoperability from a healthcare context, which is, I know, you all's claim to fame, you are connecting devices that operate on systems to communicate with one another in order to surface data that is going to be utilized by practitioners and other professionals within the healthcare context. Within the biopharma R&D space, interoperability is honestly, Jeff, a newer emerging idea, similar to real world data as a part of clinical trial data. You know, healthcare in our world was not really a part of the R&D data demand until recently, because there are greater expectations for alignment around patient populations, patient profiles, and making sure that once a product is approved, that there are mechanisms in place to compare versus the baseline of the research data outcomes and efficacy for patients in the real world. So the interoperability comes with having those systems be able to essentially play nice with one another.
Yeah, and Alexis, I think back about, a year plus ago, we went to a conference focused on real world evidence and clinical research. And Alexis and I, we live and breathe interoperability, right? That's what we know. But we started talking to people because that's what we do. And we started using the word interoperability, and nobody knew what we were talking about. And it was so eye-opening, and we got so passionate and excited about this market because we knew we could help. So, yeah.
Yeah, it was very interesting. And just like you said, I mean, to use your words, it was eye-opening because you think logically, right, that it just makes sense. Of course it makes sense. But as you said, also, Tope, it's something where the industry, I think you said this at the beginning, the industry is kind of behind on what the expectations should be and what they are. So it was very eye-opening. It really was. And it was interesting because it drove a lot of conversations that taught us about what the industry individuals, the actual users desire, but how there's been such a lag to get to that end result and what that end result could potentially achieve. Because you can fabricate in your mind, oh yeah, we could do X, Y, and Z, and look, that would be amazing. But in reality, there's so much more to it. And it was really interesting to hear all of that. And over the past 18 months, hearing and asking questions and learning, it's really been amazing.
And I think what you might have experienced, Alexis, is something of a conflation between interoperability and integration. So interoperability is at the device and then the systems that are guiding those devices level, right? Integration is data points or data sets. And in the biopharma world, data integration, of course, very commonplace, lab data, clinical trial data, etc. What the industry is moving towards is a greater alignment with what happens once the drug is in the world, right? Where you do have those systems that it might be imaging systems that are feeding into a PACS. It might be lab data that's both central and specialty labs that's external. And it might be patient reported outcomes as to what their experience is. Let's say they have a medical device implanted and you want to look at pain management, et cetera, post-operatively, right? That's all sitting in siloed data sets with different structures, different data standards, et cetera. The big overarching challenge is clinical trial data is for analysis of safety, efficacy, et cetera. Healthcare data is for decisions, prognostics, diagnostics. Just a very different alignment, a different functional use case, right? Clinical trial data has a lot of rigor around it because obviously the impact when you're experimenting on people is profound. So we have just a different level of reticence to try new things. And interoperability, unfortunately, sometimes falls into the bucket of shiny new thing, right? In our industry, we're often told that we're lagging behind finance, behind this, behind that. And how come you guys just can't move faster? Let's disrupt. Yeah. You say disrupt in our world, and it's like, yeah, I just see violations. Very hard pass, right? But what we are trying to get to, what you and I have discussed, is a world in which we recognize the boundaries, particularly of R&D, and then look at where it's appropriate to build those connections, whether that is leveraging something like Cloverleaf to provide a data output source that can then be massaged in the receiving systems. That could be a form of interoperability. Is it integration because the data points are integratable because there aren't a lot of rules around it, right? Say a nice tight numeric value like weight that doesn't require any standardization versus a BMI, which can vary, And I know that that's very granular, but those things, if you think about patient dosing, really matter when your inferred data is just as valuable to clinical practitioners. So I think that the conversations that really help to advance adoption of new technologies have to recognize the starting point and then also build upon that and start to introduce the ways in which these new approaches can have materially meaningful impacts, as opposed to just pie in the sky, we're cake, everybody's going to love us.
Absolutely. I almost don't have anything to add to it because it's such a great point, really.
Yeah, and it's almost because it's funny, Alex, because I remember the early times we were using the word interoperability, and everybody kind of looked at us a blank stare, right? And then we started saying, well, connectivity, does that make sense, right? Or integration, does that make sense? So really, the thing I'm excited most about this series is really defining those. And it's almost interoperability is that workflow optimization, right? Getting something much faster. Integration, like you said, Tope, is that point to point. So how would you define connectivity for the end user in this industry, whether it's a researcher, healthcare provider, or a patient?
I think we could take patient reported outcomes as probably the best example of that. Let's take diabetes care, right? You have glucometers, both implanted and portable. You have apps on patients' phones that receive that data that then prompt and alert the patient. Sometimes there's even workflows, depending on the type of glucometer, to trigger an alert to, say, the clinical practitioner that they may be having an event that warrants intervention. That same flow would happen in a clinical trial, right? It might be a depression study, right, where there's patient-reported or clinical outcomes assessments that are scoring the patient's risk, right? And say that score triggers an alert that then triggers the monitor to reach out to the patient to say, are you okay? Do you need to come in? Do you need more immediate medical intervention, right? So we're looking at both safety, efficacy, outcomes, all within that flow of data. So that's the connectivity that is taking a device, because a patient could have the scale on their phone still, feeding into a server that's a secured server environment that is separate and distinct from the clinical study data, but there are either points of integration, APIs, connectors, whatever there may be. And if that patient is receiving standard of care, their doctor may also be getting an alert, also because that patient is still receiving standard of care while in the trial. These are the outcomes. Here are the data points for your patient, so you can also concurrently follow them. Is that helpful, Jeff?
Very, very much so. Alexis, anything to add?
No, I think that that's a really great way to put it, though, because you can correlate the different segments of healthcare versus clinical trials, but then also understand, and you really wrapped it in together, that they still work together. When you think about that standard of care, going back to an EHR and having their, let's say, a specialist, if it's a specialist that you're seeing because of maybe you lost a limb due to diabetes, right? And so now you're adding in that arm, and that is that extra connection, that extra point, just as you mentioned. But that also goes back to that clinical trial side of, what might be that they're studying for. It could be something for amputees, for instance, and so now it's going down a completely different path, but there's that connectivity and that correlation that happens in every aspect of it.
Right. And I think interoperability offers a few benefits, right? So you've got workflow optimization. I think we all can agree there that's the promise of technology, right? Smooth out the nodes, expedite the data flows. You also have compliance opportunities with interoperability, right? Because now you have more data, more visibility, more actionable data, because those systems are truly interoperating and integrated. You have better reporting because you have more of a confluence of data surfaced in real time that you can then visualize and act upon. And then you also have opportunities for greater insight, right? What exactly is driving some of those adverse events? What is driving some of the non-compliance and adherence that we see, when something has been released into the commercial side, right? And allowing for that flow through. And the nice thing, at least the opportunity now, is that I think at least big pharma recognizes that wall needs to come down, right? In order to expedite development, in order to expedite safety reporting, in order to just make them a more, an organization that can act and move more quickly when they do get signal in terms of what their product might be capable of.
On that front, do you think that they're paying ample attention to siloed ROI, or do you think they're looking at a whole picture ROI? Because that's the first thing that I think about, with that is, if you're going to improve workflows, if you're going to, we like to say, fail faster, right? If you're going to try to get a product to market faster, what have you, of course, those are your forefront immediate ROI that you're looking at. It's pretty apparent. But that siloed individual ROI that comes out of gaining interoperability, connectivity, integration, do you think that's something that they've started to look at adequately yet? Or do you think that that's still in the works?
Well, to put it nicely, I don't think that pharma has a good handle at a unit level on a lot of their costs when it comes to outsourced activities versus insourced activities. And I think, to the point about return on investment, I think that the baseline isn't always established. There's such an urgency at times to just get going that decisions are often made based upon known vendors, existing contracts, speed. Clinical operations is a milestone-driven function, right? We want site initiation, first patient in, first patient dosed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Data folks are looking at when can we start to roll things up to the point where we have enough data to actually power statistical analysis. I just think that the ROI on the data specifically would have to capture both the means of capture and then the cost of massaging and merging that data into other data. Jeff, to the point of what you were saying earlier, 70% of clinical trial data is actually outside of the EDC, outside of the clinical trial database, right? So when we talk about interoperability, we really are talking about those same systems that overlap with healthcare, like imaging, like labs, like clinical outcomes assessments, things that would honestly feed clinical decision support from EHR. Right? If you want to parallel EDC and EHR, they're both static databases, right? They just sit there, they store things in certain formats and fields, and then you look at it because it's not actionable, right? It's the analytics, it's the reporting that actually gives you the information that drives the actual, patient treatment. So I think that sponsors have not yet, or are just now starting to look at how you can actually get that information faster to all of the functional stakeholders without having to wait for vendor X to deliver data in a batch versus vendor Y that's got a continuous stream because you actually bothered to put an API in place, say with central labs, right? So that's where I don't think sponsors have really fully embraced the big data model, if you will. And I'm saying big data more in terms of just the breadth and scope of all the data that's out there. I think they're looking at certain data sets as being very, very critical, like lab data because of safety. But they're just now starting to really evaluate what this data means in the execution of today's trial, but in the broader business portfolio downstream. And that's why I'm saying some of those barriers are coming down. If commercial's buying all this real world data from a variety of vendors, maybe there's a picture there in terms of patient identification, inclusion, exclusion criteria, site identification. There are opportunities, again, that live in that real world data that, we never touched it, that actually may drive higher ROI value because we're picking better sites. That data life cycle is faster, it's cleaner, we're getting more patients, robustness, et cetera. So those things are all just still, I think, evolving.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff is not easy, right? Healthcare and life sciences in general is very reactive. It's hard to sometimes take a step back and be proactive. We can make an impact by just doing, a couple fields, right, in a workflow, right, and automating some of that. So it's exciting. So when you think about some of the things, Tope, that you've been part of, do you have an example where integration created a breakthrough or unexpected results in your work? And then think about, where do you see interoperability kind of shaping the industry going forward?
Well, I have to go back. I know I talk about patient-reported outcomes and ECOA, but I think that modality of capturing patient data was very much, left field at one point. Now it's standard across therapeutic areas. In my early career, provisioning equipment before we had web-based apps, then getting that data from that database into our hands and into the hands of biostatisticians and data managers was a challenge. Fast forward, I'm working on opportunities where I'm integrating 4 different labs into a study in addition to 5 central labs and trying to figure out what's the best scenario there. And what ends up happening is you do have to do some cost analysis because I don't want people to think that interoperability is free, obviously. These systems do not talk to one another as a natural habit. So I think one of the challenges on opportunities that I've worked on is helping to do the cost benefit analysis, Alexis, in order to drive some of that ROI that will lead to future adoption or repeat use of the same approaches. And so the cost has to be, okay, is my API reusable? How much configuration time does it take? Right? If we have an amendment, what do I do then? I think those are the scenarios that I've worked on where I've been able to say to the sponsor, okay, you've got this many data points in labs. Let's focus here, right? Let's make this as tech enabled as possible because it's on the critical path, both in terms of safety and analysis. Let's focus there. And then having those other data sets come in as needed and have the sponsor, assess what needs to be done with those in a less high pressure environment so that we can focus on the core mission of getting the trial going and getting patients into the trial. But it has been very difficult, Jeff, to really have sponsors wholeheartedly embrace this, it's all just data, kind of philosophy, which is what I think. It's all just data, but it's hard for them because whether you're a small biotech and that's your one asset or a big pharma and that's going to be your next blockbuster, the significance can't be understated to the organization. So making the strong business case that the technology is going to align and drive their goals forward has always been really important to me. And it's not really so much about talking about, SQL or no SQL, et cetera. It's about understanding data utilization and then focusing the solution around the key data utilization needs.
Yeah, because I think, Alexis, we were at a conference. You were on a panel, and you were talking to a couple of CEOs of some clinical research companies, and I think 15 to 28 different disparate systems that they're going to have to go out to kind of piece this clinical trial together, right? And it's a very manual thing at this point. So, Alexis, what are your thoughts? I know we talk about this almost weekly, but
yeah. And to your point, Jeff, I think that's a really great thing to bring up because despite your standard, I think they say 22 standard, right? But it can be anywhere from 15 to upwards of, 30 disparate systems. Unfortunately, in tech, everybody wants to develop a new system, right? A new system that does this better, that better. So now you're going, over the next year, we could see another 10 more come in that everybody thinks are, what is it? The cat's meow, cat's pajamas, whatever that saying is. But, now everybody wants to start adding in these new ones.
Yeah, it's definitely cat's pajamas. It's definitely cat's pajamas. So I can see.
Yeah, we're going to go with pajamas. But they start adding in all these new systems to say, this is the solution, but it's not the solution. It's really not. Adding in more. More is not better. Let's see what we have, work with what we have, and create the connectivity between all of those systems for that operational streamline that you're looking for to, just as you said, Tope, let's choose what is critical first. Focus on what's critical. Make that work. Make it work well, and understand the benefits that come out of that and replicate as needed on your next tier down and then your next tier down. Just as, it's an amazing point, and that's exactly what should be done. And it's the best possible way of focusing in and honing in on what can improve right off the bat and what's going to focus on the patients first as well. I think that's one thing that we really have to pay attention to here is when we're choosing that critical environment, not only just to get the trial up and running, but critical environment for the patient also.
Right. And I think one of the challenges that I hope sponsors take on is recognizing that they have to communicate this to all stakeholders, including but not limited to the sites. So I have asked sponsors in the past, why not write data integration into the clinical protocol? Not specific types of integration, not that level of granularity, but just saying on the schedule of events, labs will be integrated, right? Set the expectations there. Okay, EMR data will be transcribed. Fine. What happens is a kind of, let's just get it done, which, look, all hands are on deck. But at the site level, they've got their SOPs. They've got their approach to doing things. They run multiple trials for multiple sponsors. So they absolutely don't want what's just awesome at the margins functionally versus what they know works, which to this day is still paper and pen, is their favorite data capture technology. So we're BC a little bit there, right? So interoperability is like, what are you talking about? So it's about making sure that when you can use your power as the sponsor, help to drive forward some of this adoption by making clear the purpose of the adoption, so that it's not seen as some command from on high to use yet another thing. Because yes, you've got 15 to 20 disparate data sources. That potentially is 15 to 20 logins. So what are we going to do? Dedicate a workstation to your trial? Especially if you're a big sponsor that we work with a lot. What if you change vendors? Right? And then a lot of that 15 to 20 is very, very niche. We analyze the tissue from this to this and can image this. It's very specific. So I think sponsors do owe, particularly clinical sites, much more clarity on the purpose of these technologies, the benefit of these technologies, and an understanding of how they fit into their workflow, so that it's not such a point of friction. Because I think if you look at EMR, EHR adoption in clinical research, that's probably the shining example of the misalignment, right? Because even within a health system, especially these big academics, we're talking about multiple instances of the big systems across practice areas. There's no world in which a sponsor is going to say now, oh yeah, let's integrate EHR, EMR data.
Well, and then when you think about that too, a conversation that we have often is you've got multiple instances of that EHR within a big system. Well, just because it's HL7 V2 data doesn't mean that it's all the exact same. There are little nuances that come with all of that. Just because it's a standard format that, is familiar, it's still not standard. It's 90%, but everyone has that 10% difference in it. And so now you're throwing that in. And, that, like I said, that's a conversation that we have constantly, because that's exactly what what Cloverleaf does, is it standardizes all of that, takes it and moves it into one format. But it's amazing to me to see, just as you said with EHRs, how different they all are and how difficult it makes something that you would think would just, communicate back and forth very easily. It does not.
And that's what I mean by that translation, right? Because what it means in the EHR is not what it means in the clinical study database, right? So what exactly are we pulling from the EHR? And there's a lot of discussion in the R&D world that we actually collect too much data, right? It's an industry of exploratory endpoints. You're trying to find bespoke proprietary endpoints even. So you're collecting all of these labs. You're making the trials extremely complex for enrollment, right? Oh, the patient has to be this. It has to be this. Their left hand turns like this, upside down. And it's like, okay. And then you get the drug approved. Well, why is it this? We're not seeing the same results in the patients. Well, it's like knockout mice in a lab. You're choosing this very specific unicorn to experiment on, and they're saying, I can't reproduce these results in the wild. I wonder why. They must all be drinking grapefruit juice. It's very difficult to kind of smooth over some of those really, really big nodes. And so I do think that the conversation has to start at a very foundational level as to the purpose of the data within the program, and then are there opportunities for that data to either benefit from real world data that might be in an EHR, EMR, or to be informed by that data, because the directionality of real world data also matters, right? And I think that also impacts interoperability use cases, Jeff, because of the audit trail challenges that exist in the clinical R&D world that make data changes, data clarification, all have to be documented. And unfortunately, in most EMRs, we're just now getting instances of the latest products that actually offer HL7 FHIR audit trails being pushed across, when previously that wasn't the case, which is a huge part of the reticence with FHIR, because we weren't getting audit trail data change data. So we didn't get that bidirectionality that API integrations promise, et cetera. What you're really just creating is pipes where data just moves in one direction.
Yeah, that's interesting. It almost, the way you both articulated some of that, it almost feels unachievable, right? because there's so many things to think about, right? So, let's wrap up these questions, and I guess what are the top 2 to 5 challenges that organizations face when looking at integrating their systems? And then we talk sometimes about buy versus build, but it's almost an area where it's buy and build. It's getting that time to value. Let organizations focus where they can provide value. But what would be those top 2 to 5 that we could get focused on, during this series to get started? Because sometimes we just need to get started, right?
Well, I think the sites are definitely the starting point in terms of the site networks that sponsors work with most frequently are usually therapeutically aligned. I think that the opportunity to better align site tools with sponsor needs and allowing more flexibility for come as you are tools to be utilized, those sponsors going to the buy versus build who are capable of that are building huge data infrastructure around their entire clinical enterprise in order to aggregate that data, sometimes in silos because that's just appropriate for the nature of the data, defining their standards on top of that, and then surfacing that data in various tools, right? Whether it be for analytics, whether it be for reporting, etc. But the first step has to be aligning what is existing in order to reduce the friction on adoption. I think the second challenge is going to be fit relative to therapeutic area. I think oncology is probably the top hot area always and forever for a variety of sad and real reasons. But oncology is also robust from a data standpoint. So it's rich in terms of the opportunities to identify. But there are other therapeutic areas that are a good fit for interoperability. I think I've referenced ePro, eCOA. Well, CNS makes huge sense there, right? To look at where there might be opportunities, but the challenge has to be fit. I do not think, and I'm saying this to my tech friends, that leading with tech is going to fix everything and we're agnostic is just not true. And so the challenge is candor in terms of what you can deliver for this particular product category today. I think the other thing is the sponsors are sometimes a bit overwhelmed with the choices because especially for the last 10 years, there have been a lot of also ran technologies that are just playing at the margins in terms of functional improvements, right? Oh, look, I can flag a field. Oh, look, pretty reports. But that's not changing anything really materially. But you got relationships, they want to give it a go, they try it, next thing you know, we don't like this anymore. So I think the challenge has to be sponsors getting real about their requirements and being candid about what those requirements are. And the tech vendor side being very candid and honest about what their products can't and can't do. Because I think that will address some of the hopeless feeling, Jeff, that you're kind of alluding to of, oh my God, it's so big, it's so whatever. I just think, which direction is the real world data flowing? That has to be a real conversation. What's the purpose of this? Will this be submitted, to the FDA? Are you just looking at this from an informational design perspective? That's a different thing. And those conversations can then lead to, I think, better outcomes that once there's enough of a bolus of users, we'll start to see some of the case studies that will increase adoption. We are a very follower-based industry, and doctors are very slow adopters of technology. So it's always going to be difficult without proof.
I think one of the things to follow up on the candid, being very candid, is also not being assumptive. I think it's very easy to be assumptive from the technology perspective, and rather than assume, question, and don't be afraid to say you don't know. I think that's one thing that happens in the tech side of things often is, people want to be quick to answer rather than quick to question. So I would, think that that's something that is imperative to remember throughout that entire process.
Alexis, let's start with you on this kind of to summarize everything. So, we've got 6 episodes. What do you hope the the audience gets out of these episodes?
I think that what I really do want the audience to get out of this is not just knowledge, and from our amazing participants that we're going to have on here, because there's going to be so much to learn, but maybe to get a action plan almost in their mind of these are the steps that I can take if this is the end result that I want to achieve. But throughout the process, I hope that they think end first. What is it that they want to see from the end? Listen to this entire series and then create that action plan through the knowledge that they're gaining from these industry experts that we're going to have.
Yep. And because I think in terms of adoption, particularly for the larger sponsors that are receptive to EHR, EMR data and real world data, I think they need to know what that would look like. So coming away with, what are some key questions I might ask to do a proof of concept? Or what are the trials that might fit the use of interoperable systems in my trials? What kind of business case do I need to make internally to get a champion, to get the stakeholders on board in order to maybe try something like this because this might help?
Exactly. Yep. What will drive those goals?
Right. Because
Yep.
Jeff, I do believe that I think as an industry, understand the opportunity. We understand the potential. The question is how and what is the cost materially, but also systemically, because failure in the R&D world is not just a failure, break things and move fast. It can destroy an entire company. I don't want to be too dramatic about it, but it is true.
It can. Yeah, it absolutely can. Yeah. We've
So,
seen it.
yes, ma'am. And so it's important to make people feel empowered that this can work, because I do think that there is a kind of instinctive understanding of what it is. Because to be candid, if I tell my little G lady over here to dim the light 75% and turn on my TV and that's interoperability, right? With connectivity. I just got excited the other day when I figured out that my TV can work as a remote for my mini split because it has infrared. And who knew? I got excited because I was going to have to buy this little doodad that went on Wi-Fi and all of that. Infrared's even faster, right? Bluetooth. What works here? What is the best fit? And I think the educational aspect as well, because I understand Bluetooth connectivity versus infrared connectivity, but you may need to explain that to clinical operations folks, right? So that they understand, oh, that's what you mean. So it's going to the same database. That type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you continue to sum it up in a great way, Tope, and bring it in real world, right? This infrared, things like that. So I think what I hope the audience gets out of this is to start to, take the concepts and things we're talking about and see how it impacts their day-to-day job, right? And start asking, I wonder if, right? I wonder if we were connected. I wonder if we were integrated. I wonder what it would mean to be interoperable, with some of these workflows, right? And let's just get started, because it's a journey, right? And you got to start somewhere. And we as an organization at Infor, we're going to get past, Alexis and I are very interested in understanding the business case behind optimizing workflow and things like that. And that's where the cost of this is going to land, right? Because we want to be partners in this market. And we see a huge impact
to
there.
your point, I did a research study as a part of a campaign in a prior role recently. I was looking at decentralized trials and how in data integration and those workflows could be optimized to help address some of the cost related things, because the sponsors didn't really know what cost they had. So the questions were around both requests for data, aggregating data, and then what it took to actually bring that data together to make it actionable. And I was shocked at the results we got, because we actually did the survey at DIA. We were looking at an average of almost 5 hours a week. And these are director level and higher. So just do the math on their hourly rate.
Yeah. Put a lot of zeros on the end there.
Exactly. So 20 hours a month. with CRO, with all of these vendors, right? But they don't capture that. You know, you're not logging their time when they're chasing things down. They're just, these clinical trial professionals are just used to working 12, 16-hour days. It's just the way that it is. But there is a real toll there, both in terms of the quality of the research, but also at an individual level. So I think being able to better elucidate the cost is going to be really key to getting advocates that can then go and get those champions and stakeholders.
Yeah, and that's powerful. I mean, we see it on the healthcare side all the time, right? Clinician burnout, right? And we see it in now what you just alluded to, life sciences, right? So getting that back, happy employees is going to provide better work. So it is amazing. It's one thing to fail faster, succeed faster, but having employees get back a more balance of life is a huge thing that maybe we just kind of discount because we expect it sometimes, right? So, yeah. Okay. Wow. That's great stuff. So this is just episode 1. So each episode is going to bring real world examples and actionable tips to power up your data ecosystem. So I want to thank both of you, Tope, and I look forward to Tope, you being back and involved in many more things with Infor, with Alexis. And Alexis, always thank you for your time. This was kind of a podcast kickoff plus my annual evaluation of Alexis. So it was actually spot on. Really good.
Tens across the board. Tens across the board.
Yes, tens across the board. So, yeah. So I want to thank everyone. Yeah, so it's great stuff. Thank everyone for listening. Make sure that you subscribe, rate, and follow the podcast series. Do not miss our next episode. Join us as we dive deep into the world of interoperability in biotech and pharma. What is it? Why it's crucial, and how it's transforming the industry. We'll explore real-world examples of improved data reliability, efficiency, and safety, discuss the role of real-world evidence in shaping clinical outcomes, and highlight successful case studies. Plus, our expert panel, as you saw here today, will share insights on the future of interoperability and its potential to revolutionize healthcare. Tune in to stay ahead of the curve. Thanks, everyone.